Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And we're on to part 3 here of our Audi Month series, partnering up with Glenmore Audi in Calgary, bringing you 4 back-to-back Audi reviews. And this time around, a real volume seller for the company. It's the smallest SUV in the company's lineup, the Q3. It goes up alongside other subcompact luxury crossovers like the new BMW X1, the Mercedes GLA, the Infiniti QX30, or the Lexus NX. It's a competitive little segment, but here's the thing with the Q3. It was introduced back in 2011 and it really hasn't been changed much since, and that's an eternity these days in the luxury crossover segment. Now, it did get a refresh back in 2016, but is that enough to keep it relevant? Let's get on board this week and see if the Q3 can still keep up right here on Family Wheels. A boxy back end. Okay, so first up, bit of a spoiler alert, there is a second generation of the Q3 in the works. In fact, staff at Glenmore Audi tell me that they're hoping for it to arrive sometime in the spring of 2019, although that's still not confirmed at this point. In the meantime though, I think the current Q3 cuts a pretty charming stance from the outside, and its looks have held up pretty well over the last 7 years. It's also a good size for people who don't want a big honking SUV for just driving around the city. And it is the cheapest SUV from Audi by a country mile. But don't let its starting price fool you. You see, on paper, the base Q3 starts at $34,900 Canadian, but that's a little misleading because all-wheel drive, believe it or not, is not standard, as is pretty much the case in all of its competitors. You tack that on, as pretty well every Canadian will want to do, and it's $2,500 more expensive at $37,400. At that base price, you're getting 18.5-inch alloy wheels, leather seats, an 8-way adjustable power driver's seat, heated front seats, and a panorama sunroof. The mid-range progressive trim adds larger 19.5-inch wheels, built-in roof rails, a power tailgate, a backup camera, and dual-zone automatic climate control. And then this top-range Technique trim gives you LED headlights, a Bose sound system, navigation, and a few more little goodies as well. Now, since this current Q3 is kind of on its last go around the block here at this point, there really isn't much change for 2018, except that the S-Line competition package is forced onto any Q3 with this Technique trim. That gives you S-Line badging, aluminum pedals, piano black inlays in the cabin, a blacked out spoiler, roof rails, and grille. You add in some metallic paint, and our as-tested price here is $46,390 before tax. But the fact that things like LED headlights, dual zone automatic climate control, or a backup camera aren't standard equipment at this point is just a really clear sign that the Q3 needs a new version very badly. Meanwhile, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Audi's latest infotainment system, and the click wheel that it uses, or things like autonomous safety features like lane keep assist or adaptive cruise control, those aren't an option at all. But one thing that really does line up with the Q3's competition is its powertrain. You look at the engines on tap in the Mercedes, Lexus, Infiniti, or here in the Q3, and they're all the same. 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engines. Engines that can give you the kick when you need it and the economy when you don't. Now, in the case of the Q3, it's lagging behind just a little in terms of power output, with 200 horsepower on tap. Both the GLA and the Infiniti QX30 have 8 more horsepower than that and 7-speed dual-clutch transmissions on board. The Lexus NX, meanwhile, trumps the whole lot with 35 more horsepower than the Q3, but both it and the Audi share a more old-school 6-speed automatic transmission. It's still a totally respectable powertrain though. The Q3 is relatively responsive, its turbo lag is there but manageable, and it's also fairly quiet at highway speed. We're measuring 64 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour. But one thing that it's certainly lagging behind on is its efficiency. Audi suggests that you should see 10.3 liters per 100 kilometers as your combined highway and city fuel economy. All of its major competitors have better numbers than that, even in the Q5, this Q3's larger sibling, and that car has 50 more horsepower. Now, we've brought that number down to 9.2 liters per 100 kilometers this week with a bit of careful driving, and that is exactly the same number that we managed to get out of the Q5 when we tested it last fall. Where this car really shows its age, though, is its interior. I really feel like I'm stepping back in time here in the Q3 with these clunky climate control buttons and readouts down here. Its low-tech, low-resolution infotainment system, only one USB port in the whole darn car. It all just feels very old. And while I do like firm seats, they are really quite firm here in the Q3. They're not going to be for everyone, so make sure to spend some good time in this car on your test drive, because when you combine these seats with a bit of a stiffer ride, you might find yourself getting jarred around. But the payoff, as is always the case with Audi, is a car that stays really composed in the corners. This does not feel like a lumbering, roly-poly crossover once you get into the twisties. Where this car might surprise you, though, is the second row. Audi's managed to carve out more space back there than you might expect. And yes, with the driver's seat set for a tall driver like me at over 6 foot tall, the space is tight. But with Devin driving, she's 5'7", I have more than enough legroom and headroom back there for a long drive. Roger also has plenty of space for his front-facing car seat. Rear-facing, however, is a different story. You flip that car seat around and we're left with just 27 inches from the back of the front passenger seat up to the glove box. It could work, but you will find it to be a bit of a squeeze. And when I was telling you last week that we were going to be reviewing the Q3, I heard from Mark in North Shields, England, and he owns a 2017 Q3, gave me a bit of feedback about what he thinks of the car. One of the big things he said, he's got one kid and it works great for their family, but they're thinking about having a second, at which point one of the first things he'll do is likely go down to the dealership and pick up a Q5. It is fairly tight in here, and that just comes with the territory of this class of SUV. And that also applies to the trunk area. You've got 473 liters of space behind the second row. Its cargo capacity is squarely in the middle of this subcompact pack, which means that you've got a little bit more space than the Mercedes GLA and not quite as much as the Lexus or Infiniti offerings. So yes, you can fit our standardized trunk test in there, but not much else. Comox, meanwhile, can fit, but it is tight quarters for her, especially with this sloped off back window. It means that she doesn't have as much headroom as well. If you've got taller items you're trying to fit back there, it's going to be tough for that as well. And if you do flip these second row seats down, they don't lay flat, which makes it just a little less user-friendly for bigger loads. So it's a bit of a swan song for this current generation of the Q3. Glenmore Audi tells me production on this car has already wound down. So at this point, Audi is just kind of selling out what they've already built. But the Q3 has built a solid base of buyers who in many cases have loyally come back for a second Q3 when it was time for a new car. But after having spent so much time in this latest generation of Audi vehicles, the new Q5, the new A4 family of cars, that A5 Sportback from 2 weeks ago that I was driving, I've had a chance to see what the company can do. And whether we're talking about its infotainment system, its interior design, its transmission, even its fuel economy, this Q3 just kind of feels like it's stuck in a bit of a time capsule at this point. So honestly, if you can hold off to see what the next Q3 has in store, my advice would be, yeah, hold off, because this latest crop of Audi vehicles that I've had a chance to drive in has really impressed me. And I can practically guarantee you here that it will be worth the wait. Now next time, we'll wrap up Audi month by putting the top down on the A5 Cabriolet and hitting the open road. That's next time I see you, right here on Family Wheels.